The restaurant was glowing that evening, chandeliers casting golden reflections across polished glasses, laughter echoing from tables filled with powerful men. Waiters glided like ghosts, serving expensive wines and imported dishes. But for Aqsa, every step she took felt heavier than the last. She'd been working double shifts for weeks, saving to buy her younger brother a new hearing aid. Her life revolved around silence, not her own, but his. She knew what it meant to be unheard. At table number 7 sat Zahid Khan, one of the city's most powerful billionaires. Known for his arrogance, charm, and temper, Zahid was celebrating a new business deal, surrounded by partners who laughed at every cruel joke he cracked. Beside him sat a boy, about 14, wearing a red hoodie. His eyes were kind but distant, and a small black hearing device rested behind his ear. He kept staring at his plate, untouched. "Come on, speak up, Adam," Zahid barked, his tone half teasing, half irritated. "Say something to my friends. Show them you're not completely useless." The men roared with laughter. Aqsa froze mid-step, holding a tray of glasses. Her eyes shifted to the boy. He wasn't just silent. He looked broken. Zahid noticed Aqsa staring. He turned his sharp eyes toward her and smirked. "You there," he said mockingly. "You're a waitress, right? You deal with people all day. Why don't you try talking to my deaf son? Maybe you'll get more words out of him than I ever could." The men burst out laughing again. Aqsa felt her hands tremble. The insult wasn't just to the boy. It was to every person who ever suffered quietly. But instead of walking away, she placed the tray down carefully and walked closer. She knelt slightly, facing the boy. His head was still low, eyes glassy. She smiled gently, not out of pity, but warmth. Then, to Zahid's shock, she began moving her hands, not words but signs. Soft, graceful, fluid, sign language. The boy's eyes widened, his lips trembled. No one had ever spoken to him like that, not in his Father East world of noise and mockery. "Hello," she signed. "My name's Aqsa. You don't have to speak. I can listen." The boy blinked rapidly, and for the first time that night, he smiled. A silence spread across the table. Zahid's laughter died in his throat. His friends looked between him and Aqsa, confused and uncomfortable. The arrogant billionaire who thought he owned every voice in the room was now speechless. The laughter that once filled the restaurant had faded into awkward silence. Aqsa stood calmly beside the table, her eyes still soft, her hands gently lowering back to her sides. The boy, Adam, was still smiling shyly, watching her as if he'd just seen light for the first time. "What was that?" Zahid demanded, his voice slightly cracking. "What did you just do?" Aqsa straightened, meeting his cold eyes without fear. "I spoke to your son," she said simply, in his language. The men around the table exchanged glances. One of them tried to lighten the mood with a nervous laugh, but Zahid didn't join. His face tightened. "My son doesn't need pity," Zahid snapped. "He needs to learn how to live in the real world, where people talk." Aqsa didn't flinch. "And maybe you need to learn how to listen," she replied softly. A few gasps escaped from nearby tables. The arrogant billionaire had just been answered by a waitress. Zahid's jaw clenched. For a moment it looked like he would explode, but something in Aqsa's calmness disarmed him. There was no defiance in her voice, only truth. Before he could respond, Adam tugged lightly at his sleeve. Zahid looked down in surprise. His son was signing, hesitantly, slowly, his fingers trembling. Aqsa smiled and interpreted aloud. He said, "Thank you." Everyone froze. Zahid stared at his son, disbelief washing over his face. "He spoke," he whispered. "He's never—" Aqsa nodded gently. He didn't need words, just understanding. The boy looked up at his father with wet eyes, then back at Aqsa. He signed something else. Aqsa hesitated, then looked straight at Zahid. He said, "You never really looked at me, Dad." Zahid's throat tightened. The room seemed smaller now, quieter, as guilt settled like a heavy fog. For a man who could buy the world, he suddenly realized, he'd lost the one thing that mattered most. Zahid pushed his chair back, unable to bear the weight of those unspoken words. He stood, trying to mask his confusion behind anger. "That's enough," he said sharply. "Get back to work." Aqsa bowed slightly. "Of course, sir." But as she turned away, Adam quickly signed something again. Aqsa paused, then looked at Zahid. He said, "Please let her come back. She makes the world quiet." Zahid froze. For the rest of the evening he couldn't focus. Every laugh felt hollow. Every word he said echoed like noise. His eyes kept drifting to the counter, where Aqsa worked quietly, her smile soft, her heart strong. Something inside him stirred. A voice he hadn't heard in years. Not anger, not pride, but shame and curiosity. That night, as the last customer left, Zahid waited by the exit. When Aqsa finally stepped out, exhausted and ready to walk home, she found him standing by his car, the city lights glowing behind him. "I want to know," Zahid said quietly. "How did you learn that? Sign language?" Aqsa looked at him, her tone steady but tired. "My brother," she said. "He's deaf too. I learned because I didn't want him to feel alone." Zahid's eyes softened, just slightly. "And you think I made my son feel that way?" Aqsa sighed. "No, sir. I think you forgot that silence isn't emptiness. It's full of feelings waiting to be heard." Zahid said nothing. For the first time in years, the billionaire had no words. The next morning, Zahid Khan sat at the head of his massive dining table, a golden chandelier glowing above, marble floors gleaming beneath. But the silence in the room was different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. Adam sat quietly on the other side, eating cereal without looking up. Zahid tried to start a conversation, his voice softer than usual. "So, you like that waitress?" Adam blinked, surprised. Then slowly, he signed a small yes. Zahid's heart twisted. His son's face glowed at the mere mention of her name. That afternoon, when Adam went to his therapy class, Zahid made a decision that surprised even him. He drove back to the same restaurant. He didn't tell anyone. From the corner booth, wearing sunglasses like he wanted to hide, Zahid watched quietly as Aqsa worked, smiling at customers, balancing trays, wiping tables, never once losing her calm. He noticed how she'd crouch down to speak to an elderly man, or how she'd gesture kindly to a little girl who dropped her spoon. Every move spoke of patience, something money couldn't buy. And then, during her short break, he saw her pull out an old phone, cracked, with a fading wallpaper of a boy smiling in front of a small house. Zahid realized it was her brother. The same hearing aid, the same innocent smile as Adam's. His heart sank. She wasn't pretending to care. She knew that world. The world of silence, struggle, and sacrifice. That evening Zahid went home with a strange heaviness inside him. He found himself sitting in Adam's room, watching his son draw quietly. The boy drew two stick figures, one small, one tall, holding hands. When Zahid asked what it was, Adam signed something slowly. "It's me, and the waitress." Zahid felt tears burn behind his eyes. "Do you like her?" he asked softly. Adam smiled, then signed again. "She listens." Zahid looked down. The truth hit him harder than any deal gone wrong. He had built skyscrapers, companies, and empires, but not a bridge to his own son. The next day, Zahid returned to the restaurant again. But this time he didn't sit and hide. He walked straight to the counter. Aqsa looked up, startled. "Sir, you're here again?" Zahid nodded. "I wanted to apologize. For last night, I shouldn't have mocked my son like that." Aqsa studied his face. There was sincerity, even shame. "Apologies don't cost much, sir, but understanding does." Zahid gave a faint smile. Then maybe it's time I start paying for the right things. Before Aqsa could respond, Adam came running inside, his driver barely keeping up. The boy spotted her instantly, waving excitedly and signing something. Aqsa laughed softly, replying in sign language. "You're supposed to be in school." Zahid watched silently, the way Adam's eyes lit up, how naturally they communicated, how happy he looked. For the first time, Zahid wasn't jealous of the bond. He was grateful someone could reach his son when he couldn't. Aqsa turned to Zahid. "You know he's trying very hard," she said gently. "He wants you to listen, not with your ears, but your heart." Zahid exhaled deeply, his usual confidence melting away. "Then teach me," he said quietly. "Teach me how to listen." That night, the billionaire who once mocked silence sat beside a waitress in the empty restaurant as she began teaching him sign language, one gesture at a time. And as the night went on, something beautiful began to form between them. Not love yet, but understanding, the rarest kind of wealth. The lessons continued night after night. Zahid Khan, the billionaire who once silenced boardrooms with a glare, now sat humbly across from Aqsa, repeating the simplest signs like a child learning his first words. "Thank you. I'm sorry. I love you." He stumbled often, and each mistake made Adam laugh softly. For once, Zahid didn't mind being laughed at. It felt human. Over time, the restaurant staff grew used to seeing them after hours, Aqsa teaching, Adam signing, Zahid listening. The man who once bought everything with money was now earning something priceless, connection. But one evening, everything changed. Aqsa arrived late, breathless, pale, her eyes red. She apologized quickly, trying to hide her trembling hands. Zahid noticed. "What's wrong?" She tried to smile. "Nothing, sir. Just, my brother's hearing aid broke again. He can't hear anything until I fix it, and the repairs cost more than I have." Zahid frowned. "How much do you need?" Aqsa shook her head. "No, sir. I'll manage. I don't want help. Some things I need to fight for myself." He respected that, but her pain stayed with him. That night he drove home restless. He looked at Adam sleeping peacefully, the small device behind his ear blinking softly, and thought about Aqsa's brother, another child lost in silence. The next morning, Zahid went to the hospital where top audiologists worked. Within hours, he ordered a new advanced hearing device under a fake donor name. But fate had something darker waiting. That same night, as a heavy storm lashed the city, Zahid got a call from the restaurant manager. "Sir, it's Aqsa. She didn't come to work. Her brother collapsed. They're at the public hospital." Zahid didn't think twice. He drove through the rain, his car splashing through flooded streets, until he reached the dimly lit emergency ward. Inside, he found Aqsa sitting by a hospital bed, her clothes soaked, her eyes hollow with fear. A frail boy lay there, barely breathing, his hearing aid missing. "Doctor says his infection spread," Aqsa whispered. "He needs surgery tonight, but I don't have enough." Her voice broke. "They won't start without payment." Zahid didn't say a word. He walked straight to the counter, pulled out his card, and said in a steady voice, "Do it, whatever it costs." When he returned, Aqsa was crying silently, clutching her brother's small hand. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't owe me anything." Zahid sat beside her, his face calm but heavy with emotion. "I'm not doing this for you," he said softly. "I'm doing it because of you." You reminded me what real listening means. Hours later, when the surgery ended successfully, the doctor told them the boy would recover. Aqsa closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. Zahid turned to leave quietly, but Aqsa stopped him. "Sir, why did you hide your name as the donor?" He smiled faintly. "Because not everything good has to come with a name. Sometimes silence speaks louder." As dawn broke, the billionaire who once mocked a deaf boy stood outside that small hospital, feeling lighter than he had in years. For the first time, Zahid Khan realized wealth meant nothing if your heart stayed poor. Days passed, and the city's noise faded behind the quiet hospital walls where Aqsa spent her nights beside her brother. Zahid came every evening, not as a billionaire, not as a boss, but as a man who had finally learned to care. He brought books, healthy food, even toys for the boy. Yet he never made a show of it. He'd sit quietly, helping the nurse, or just talking to Aqsa's brother in sign language, clumsy but sincere. Aqsa often caught herself smiling as she watched him. The arrogant, mocking man from the restaurant was gone. What stood in his place was someone entirely different, someone humble, quiet, almost broken, but healing. When her brother was discharged, Zahid offered to drive them home. Their house was small, at the edge of a crowded street, but filled with warmth. Her brother ran inside happily, showing off his new hearing device, the one Zahid had secretly arranged. Aqsa turned to him, crossing her arms. "You think I don't know it was you?" she asked, smiling faintly. Zahid looked away, pretending not to understand. "Maybe someone else cares about your brother as much as you do." She shook her head. "No, only one man in this city knows how to listen that well." For a moment, silence filled the air. But it wasn't empty. It was heavy with unspoken gratitude, with feelings neither dared to name. The next week, Zahid returned to his usual office life. Board meetings, deals, deadlines. But something had changed. His assistant noticed he smiled more. His staff whispered that he had started a new project, one no one expected from him. He called it the Voice Within Foundation, a charity to provide free hearing aids, therapy, and education for children with hearing disabilities. When the press asked what inspired him, Zahid simply said, "Someone once taught me that silence isn't a weakness. It is another language of strength." Aqsa didn't know about the foundation until one afternoon when she entered the restaurant and saw a newspaper headline pinned to the board, "Arrogant billionaire turns savior for deaf children." Her eyes widened. Beneath the title was a photo. Zahid standing beside a group of smiling deaf children. And next to him, Adam, holding a sign that read, "Thank you, Miss Aqsa." She couldn't hold back her tears. That evening, Zahid came to the restaurant again, but this time it wasn't for dinner. It was to invite her somewhere. "My son wants you to come," he said softly. "We're opening the first center tomorrow. He says it won't feel right if you're not there." Aqsa hesitated, but his sincerity made her nod. The next day, the hall was filled with lights, cameras, and reporters. Zahid stood on stage with Adam beside him. The boy smiled proudly, signing his words as Zahid translated aloud. "My father used to think silence meant emptiness," Adam signed. "But now he knows. It means love, patience, and listening." The crowd applauded. Tears glistened in Zahid's eyes. He looked toward the back, where Aqsa stood quietly, wearing a simple white dress, her eyes shining. When the applause settled, Zahid spoke into the microphone, his voice steady. "And there's one more person I must thank. Someone who taught me the greatest lesson of all, how to listen." He turned, meeting Aqsa's gaze. "Aqsa, would you come here, please?" The crowd turned, cameras flashing as she walked slowly to the stage. Zahid stepped aside and handed her the ribbon-cutting scissors. "You should be the one to open this, not me." Aqsa looked at him, speechless. "But sir," he smiled softly, "you helped me find my son's voice. It's time the world heard yours." As she cut the ribbon, the hall erupted in cheers. Adam ran forward, wrapping his arms around her, signing with a wide grin, "You're our hero." Aqsa knelt, hugging him tight. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We're all heroes when we choose kindness over pride." That night, as the crowd faded and the lights dimmed, Zahid stood beside her under the quiet sky. "Thank you," he said, "for saving more than just my son. You saved me too." Aqsa smiled gently. "You saved yourself, sir." I just reminded you how. He looked at her one last time, then said with a warmth she'd never heard before, "Please, don't call me sir anymore." For the first time, Aqsa laughed softly, and in that moment, silence truly became beautiful.